BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We have Sean Fitz and Nate Bauer here to talk about a lot of stuff. We've got a press conference sandwich this week. Monday, press conference. Friday, press conference. In the middle, all the good stuff, all the gooey Penn State football talk. Today, tomorrow, and of course Thursday, where we have our recruiting show. So there's there's just like an eclectic amount of things going on. And I was talking to Nate before the show, and I was saying, we're coming out of football season where there's structure and I know what's going on. This is where these guys shine. So all I'm trying to do this week is put you guys in the best position possible. And I'm going to start that out by not having a great question to ask you, Nate. But how are you doing, and what are you thinking about this week with all the things going on?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. What am I thinking about this week? I think that I am thinking about resolution, right? It's been a process, and there have been some situations that have been resolved for Penn State football over the last 10 days, right? But there are many more to come. Like Theo Johnson and Chop Robinson have given us signals of what they're doing for the bowl game.
Yeah.
Just being blunt, there are dozens more,
yes,
that could make themselves clear or clarify in the next few days. Maybe longer than that, but certainly it's an interesting time. I think we discussed this a couple of weeks ago. The sheer number of options of players with options to either come back or go, transfer or not, right? You have it. I mean, it's a whirlwind, and it doesn't really stop, and it certainly has not reached its conclusion yet.
It's interesting because this time of year, historically, I think I'm still stuck in the idea that most guys, the NFL is the only real answer. Like, once you get past a certain point, you are what you are as a player, and you go get your money. But with NIL, the math is different at this point. Fitz, is that fair to say? Like, the math is definitely different for certain guys.
It's still that, but the point has moved up. The point has moved up a couple of rounds, and the options of coming back and getting paid. For I don't want to call it more secure money, because if you're a seventh round pick, you don't know how all that kind of stuff works. But you come back for another year, and then you get the seventh round pick next year, or you get the sixth, fifth, whatever. It changes the math, and there's a lot to work on there. It's I don't know. It's so tough to say what's the right decision, what's the wrong decision for some of these guys, because for some of these guys there is no seventh round pick. There is no future in football if everything goes, it's sort of how we project it to go. So, and that's the fun part about this time. And Nate says it's been 10 days. It's the portal's been open, to everyone for just a little bit over a week. It feels like a month, it feels like,
yes,
especially you throw a defensive coordinator search in there. It feels like there's a lot of time that has passed, and it's kind of looking at the watch and seeing what's happening here. So, I think that they're there, but I think you're right in the sense of it's still the same formula. It's just the numbers have changed a little bit, and it makes it a little bit tougher on those guys, and you can't blame them. I mean, you got to figure out the most marketable, most dollar and cents formula that comes through for you. And that's different for every position. It's different for every age. That's different for every background. Like, there's a lot of guys that have jumped in the NFL because of their, they needed the money now. You don't really have to do that now. And I think that's fantastic. But on the other hand, it does change a lot of how we do things.
I want to come back to you on another question here about this. By the way,
Nate looks like he really wants to say something.
I have so much to say.
Go for it.
Okay, so two things. One, the idea of the money that you make in the NFL versus the money that you're going to make in NIL, right? That's promised money in NIL, right? You're talking about literally like a handshake agreement. It's not guaranteed, right? So there are guys that are going to take leaps of faith based on what is told to them they'll get in NIL. And granted, every program is different, but you can be enticed, whether you're in the portal or not, by outside programs saying, hey, you can make NIL, you can make this dollar figure NIL, and you make that leap, and then it doesn't happen, or some variation of it happens, right? It's a different arrangement than what you necessarily anticipate. So I just think it's a fascinating and in a lot of ways bad place that the sport is in right now, where it is, people always, we've been doing this, Fitz, for 20 years, right? Ish. There has never been a time where every player, every coach, every single offseason truthfully has a decision to make. Every single, like, it is comprehensive. It is the entirety of the roster has a decision to make every single offseason. And that is kind of where we're at right now. Like this exact period is where those decisions are being made.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's kind of where we are with this show, is just tracking what's happened so far. Truthfully, not as much from a public facing as you guys have mentioned. Like the announcements that have been made, only a couple, but there's a lot of guys that have those decisions. And we're in that phase of trying to track what the roster is going to look like next year, or in short term, going into the bowl game. So we're going to be talking about a lot of that today. Penn State held their Peach Bowl press conference yesterday. So really, we're going to talk about what James Franklin and Pat Kraft had to say about everything surrounding the game. And then we'll talk about those roster updates and preview what's coming up on Friday with the actual Bowl Media Day. We're going to get a chance to talk to Andy Koltelnicki for the first time. So I'm just curious to see what you guys are thinking about in those realms. The first thing I want to talk to you about, though, is if there is one hard and fast rule, the money will come to you if you're a good football player. And you need to make your skills bulletproof. One of the best ways to be good at football, especially in the trenches, is to be good with your hands. But how do you do that? Well, one way that I know is to check out MMAFx. This is a specific hand fighting technique taught by Bruce Lombard of Lombard MMA in State College. It is the only comprehensive hand fighting program video set for football players available. This is not just for football players at Penn State specifically, although he does train the entire offensive line and several defensive linemen, including Dennis Sutton. So you should definitely check that out. But this is for high school football players. This is for college programs. I know we have prospects and prospects' families, especially that listen to the Thursday show. We've been talking about that. If you want to get better at football, programs like Auburn, Florida, Purdue, Western Kentucky, Penn State, Old Dominion, Virginia Tech, all of these teams that want to get better in the trenches, especially on the defensive line, they use MMAFx, and it's taught with over 2 hours of hand fighting and hand speed technique drills, including 4 levels of progression, so you can make sure you get better over time. And Bruce is there in the video to help teach you. So if you're like, hey man, I don't know anything about this, how am I supposed to teach it? It's professionally shot. They have up close technique angles, slow motion, visual details to show you what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's like Bruce is there with you to help train your defensive line so you can go after that high school state championship. It's the off season. If you're planning your off season and you want to incorporate this, the weight room's super important. But if you can't translate all of those gains to the football field, doesn't matter. So MMAFx .net. You can also get, during the holiday season, this is the important part, use promo code 15BWI to get 15% off at lombardmma.com/shop. So not only are you getting this very rare, the only one of its kind hand fighting techniques, you're also getting 15% off. So use the promo code 15BWI. We love being partners with MMAFx and Bruce here on the show. So thank you to him. Thank you to you for listening and watching, and you should definitely check it out. And I'm not just saying that because they're a partner on the show. I believe in this stuff too. Guys, Peach Bowl press conference yesterday. A lot about the defensive coordinator search, sort of. So, Nate, I want to start with you. What was your biggest takeaway from what the parties involved said when they were asked questions about definitely the Peach Bowl? We're definitely talking about the Peach Bowl here.
Yeah, I thought that Gary's keys to the game were really important. That was I should explain that to everybody.
You probably should, yeah.
Yeah.
Gary,
by the way, check out the full video. We have the full press conference so you can see what Nate's talking about.
Yeah, Gary
Stoken,
the CEO of the Peach Bowl. It was a very nice guy. Seemed very nice. Gave like a 12-minute preamble to the Constitution there, where he declared all of the ins and outs of what makes a good matchup, and so he was very excited and selling the game, and maybe a little bit misplaced, but that's neither here nor there. Eventually, they did get to allowing some questions, and those questions were directed towards James Franklin and Pat Kraft, and talked about the hiring process, how Pat Kraft is used as a resource in the hiring process, but bottom line leaves the decision of assistant coaching hires to his head coaches, right? It's not just James Franklin. It's across the board. It's for all of Penn State sports. So that shed a little bit of light. James Franklin, I thought, mentioning that I'm not going to be able to phrase this correctly because it's a paraphrase, but talking about how, whether it's internal or external candidates at defensive coordinator, right, and how they replace it, how they replace Manny Diaz, I thought was interesting. It kind of lends some credence to the idea that there are guys on that defensive side of the ball, that assistant coaching staff that are probably going to be considered, will at least get some consideration in the process. But yeah, look, it's there are decisions to be made. They have not yet been made. And so that's kind of where we're at, is not a whole lot of solid information to get across the finish line, right, at this point in the process.
We have a little bit of audio to talk about Pat Kraft kind of framing the conversation around searches for assistants and coaches and things like that. And here's what he had to say.
I'm here to support them. I'm here to do whatever I can. I can be a sounding board for them, but I'm here to just support in any way I can. And I know everyone thinks that's financially related. It's not. But I also want to make sure I challenge them to think big and think in a different way maybe than what was thought of in the past. But I would like to think that I'm a person that they can lean on to say, what do you think here? Because sometimes it's always better to have outside eyes looking at it.
So Fitz, getting kind of to the nuts and bolts of what Nate was talking about, you've got a couple internal candidates. Terry Smith, want to make sure he's part of the conversation. Anthony Poindexter, safeties coach. So the secondary well represented in this conversation. But also, Pat Kraft is saying, think big. So the scope of the search is not going to be, hey, do what Manny did. It's going to be, hey, who's the best guy for the job? I guess, where do you paint the scope of this search and what James Franklin is doing right now with the defensive coordinator position?
I think they're treating it like a top 10 program would treat it, in the sense that if you want to go big, here's your, there's a budget obviously, but like there is, hey, you're trying to win, we're going to try and get the best guy to win. And whether that's an internal guy, whether that's an external guy. And I think you can say a lot of that, but I know Nate and I have talked and there's, not the names that are floating around, but it's like there's a dedication to this, similar to the offensive coordinator, and you don't have games to deal with. You don't have game plans to prep for and things like that. So maybe you could focus a little bit more of your attention on it, but there's a dedication to this that I don't know that we've seen in a ton of hirings in the past. Now, James is always very thorough. Like, this is a situation where he has his list and he narrows down that list, and he wants to talk to people multiple times, and he wants people to talk to Pat Kraft, and he wants people to figure out how they would not only fit for in terms of like a play calling on Saturday, but also in Central Pennsylvania, because it's not everybody's cup of tea. So this is figuring out the step for the next 2 years. And if this year is any indication, we saw that the defense is the bedrock of this team. So you are making a hire where it is essentially a head coach, just like we talked about. I mean, we're repeating points here on the offense coordinator because they hold true. The job opened up a little bit differently, but this is a big time opportunity for Penn State. If they have a window right now, they want to do this as seamlessly as possible. So find the best things that Manny Diaz did and roll them over. And, if there were cracks in it, when you can always find cracks, of course, sure. But try and figure out how to plug those up. So I don't think there's any indication that this is, you're going to fall on your face doing this thing. Like, this is a situation where it's very important, and it's a notable job, man. Like, you look at Brent Pry is now at Virginia Tech. He was the defensive coordinator here. Manny Diaz is now at Duke. We can just debate all you want whether that's the right job or not. It is a Power 4 job, I guess you call it now. This is an opportunity to come in, coach a defense that has the athletes. You've seen the athletes out there, and make yourself look really good. So this is an appealing opportunity for somebody out there. Whether it's one of the initial names or whether it's somebody that breaks onto the scene a little bit later, I don't know. But it's a very appealing job, and I think a lot of it's been in demand based on what I'm hearing from people in the industry outside of Penn State.
Ben says this in the chat. He says, I can't imagine talking about the business of sports is terribly fun for anyone. Some people love it. I love talking about some of the high-level stuff with Nate in the offseason. This is our bread and butter in the offseason. So, Nate, aside from that, the defensive coordinator search is as Fitz just outlined it, this is a serious job that lots of people are going to be interested in. But in the meantime, Penn State has to have a bowl game. They have practices. They are trying to keep things running in-house. So Franklin said we'll talk more about it later in the week. What do you think we're going to learn about how they're running things on Friday? Do you have any thoughts on the current setup and how it's going to go for the bowl game?
Just given the fact of how he handled the offensive coordinator situation with Ty Howell and J1 Sider, I would anticipate him not telling the media who is actually calling defensive play, right? I guess it would be a surprise to me. Maybe he goes in that direction, but I think it's a combination of the same deal, right? Protecting his guys and also dispersing the praise, right? You want everyone to get a little bit of shine, and you want that shared responsibility to be felt throughout the assistant coaching staff room. So, some combination of Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter, I think makes the most sense. But in terms of how it's actually being called, I would anticipate him not saying publicly what that situation is going to be.
Fitz, can you give us a little bit of the backstory on Anthony Poindexter and Terry Smith and why they are so highly regarded, I think, both internally, and why Anthony Poindexter is a guy that fans are very excited for having him promoted from within? Because it seems like there's a surge for these guys specifically, and I just wanted to get a little bit of the backstory on what those guys have done at Penn State or elsewhere.
Well, first off, with Dex, take a look at that safety room, because that is turned into one of the more dominating units on it, and the names have changed there. You go from Brisker to Tig, KJ Winston, obviously, stepping up into that role right now. So, like, that is a production development type standpoint where you're looking at a guy that has done really well, recruited those guys and turned them into players that we thought they would be when they're recruits. Doesn't always happen that way. So his development track is there. He's also got coordinator experience, and you can go back into his time. He was at Virginia, at UConn. So he's bounced around a little bit in terms of, is he the play caller, is he not? But like, this is a guy with a track record. He's been in the mix for head coaching jobs. He did not get the job at Virginia a couple of years ago. Every time that job is open, that's going to come up. So it's just going to be very interesting. And if you hang around Dex, he's a different cat, but he's sharp in terms of what goes on with the football. So very interested to see where that fits. And Terry just has been around forever. He's part of the inner circle now. He was an outsider that worked his way into the inner circle. He has turned down coordinator jobs in the past, and he's been a guy that has been extremely loyal, and he's extremely sharp. Like, it's not a situation where it's just a guy that's just hung on for so long because everybody likes him. Like, the dude is sharp. He knows what he's doing. He's a great recruiter. He's got all that. I don't think he would be as much in the situation here because he's not an experienced play caller. Dex has a little bit on him in that nature. But in terms of going big, it's tough to say. But Terry is as well respected in that building as anybody, and will continue to be here as long as he's here. So I think there's that. And on top of that, I mean, say the same thing about corners that I just said about safeties. I mean, that has legitimately gone from a wasteland to where it is today, and where we're talking about, a couple of potential draft picks in the spring. Joey Porter playing really well in the pros. It's just there's a lot to like there about his recruitment and development in that back end, because Penn State's secondary just has not been an issue.
Sean here in the chat, he says, thanks for all your hard work this season, guys. Happy holidays to you. It is the season of being thankful. Started about 2 weeks ago. He says, Sean's anti-fragile hat is tempting me. That's the brewery Anti-Fragile, right?
Yeah, Fitz? That's the one downtown. Yeah, they do a great job. It's one of my favorite spots.
Kevin says, have a safe and happy holidays. Thank you to everybody here who's always a regular. Kevin, a regular. Sean, a regular. I appreciate you guys being here. The schedule has been a little bit messy, and I love having, hey, we're here on these days specifically. Just with everything that's been going on, we're going to be getting back into a rhythm, though, in the new year. Once
holidays
Christmas will
really
over.
help with that.
Anything else, Nate, from yesterday that you found interesting that I haven't brought up or asked you about?
Yeah, I thought that I took the comment of I will have more detail on the next time that we're together as intriguing from a hiring standpoint. Not that I think they'll put somebody in front of us, right? That Penn State doesn't work like that. It takes longer than that. But the notion of there might be somebody to talk about by then, I thought is a possibility. Put it that way. Just the way that he was talking about that was kind of my reading between the lines on that comment. But yeah, no, it's look, this is the situation for Penn State football now, right? Is you are a victim is the wrong word, but like victim of your success, right? You have that success that steady over that many years. I thought that something that James Franklin said, and I wrote it maybe a week and a half ago, about Penn State's longevity in terms of defensive excellence. Like it is all there. The numbers are there for you, right? And so if you look at the number of times that Penn State has had top 10 defenses over the last 30 years, over the last 20 years, it's over 50%. Like it is a remarkable number of the times that Penn State has put out or produced that type of defense. The 30-year average points per game given up, I think, is 18.5. Like, you're talking about something that stands the test of time in terms of how it has been a foundational part of this program. So that is something that it's not like Penn State and James Franklin are coming at this hiring process from anything other than a point of like complete strength. They are very strong. He will have his options of guys that he wants to fulfill that role. So we'll just see how quickly they can move to get that done.
It's a chaotic time of year. I think that's the main thing. My main point of today's video and our conversation is it's a very chaotic time of year with a lot of things that can happen at any point. Let me give you an example. So yesterday we have the Peach Bowl press conference in the morning. I then go and deliver some magazines downtown, the latest issue of the Blue White Illustrated magazine, also out on newsstands, if you want to check that out. Deliver that downtown. I come home, and I look down, and I say, oh, Penn State's gotten a commit from the transfer portal. I just see that on the internet, and I go, okay, well, there's my afternoon. At no point in any of these times did I have time to get lunch. And despite the fact that the season is over, there's a lot of things going on. So if you want to be like me and Fitz, Nate, check out Factor. They're ready-to-eat meals delivery service that can help you fuel your breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered to your door. This is not basically a high school lunch that somebody had thrown into a package and then sent to your house. These are real meals and real chefs preparing these things with real ingredients. They are really good. Nate, I know I'm using really a lot, but like I want to stress, These are good. Nate enjoyed them, and he's got a high bar for what actually tastes good and he's a foodie. You have a blog, Nate, I believe? You have a food blog, or you have a top 10 ranking somewhere?
Nope.
But I multiple group texts where he complains about the food in State College. I know that for a fact. That's true.
It leaves something to be desired, but Factor is fantastic. I tried out their foods and I believe it was the keto option. I'm not keto, but I chose that plan. There was a plan. They have different dietary emphases. Doesn't matter. What's the plural of emphasis? Nobody else knows.
You stumped me. This is Jeopardy?
Yeah. In any case, they're very good. The food is very good. It comes packaged excellently, cold packaged, but not frozen. The food is never frozen before you get it. So I tend to think that these things come out better, taste better, are more enjoyable. The textures, all of that stuff. Yes. It's legit. Yeah. Don't use the microwave option. That's not my style.
But put it in the oven.
Take your 12 minutes in the oven. You will appreciate every bite of that meal. Factor,
Yeah.
100%.
And they do have other options that Nate is talking about, where they have the keto option. They have some dietary, some calorie conscious options where everything is 550 calories if you're trying to lose weight. They have some non-heated options as well. The point is that you should definitely check this out and use the promo code. Head to factor.com /BWI50, or just go to factormeals.com, use BWI50 at checkout to get 50% off your purchase. That's a holiday deal. So the stress of taking care of everybody else, especially if you're a busy mom and you're not a football guy, this works for anybody. If you have to feed your family, make sure you feed yourself as well. Also want to thank My Perfect Franchise for being a part of the show as well. My Perfect Franchise, no matter what the situation in the economy is, there's always a part that is moving. And Andy Ludicky of MyPerfectFranchise.net has his finger on the pulse of that. He can help you live your American dream by finding you the right business to manage. If you have corporate skills, you've developed business skills and leadership skills, or maybe you're an expert in a field, you have spent your life learning a bunch of skills. Now let him find the right place for you to manage that and maximize your earning potential. Contact him at 404-973-9901 or at the Blue White Illustrated message board if you want to sign up, or myperfectfranchise.net. He can help you live your American dream and take your life to the next level, or add supplemental income, whatever it is that you want to do. I know I was talking to him. I've been doing a bunch of renovations on my house, and I was like, oh, we're going to have a conversation about all this stuff, because that was something he brought up of house renovations are really big right now because, inflation is high, so something else has opened up. That's just an example to show you that even if you think things aren't going well right now, there is some angle for your business or your business skills. So once again, 404-973-9901. Want to ask you a question. Here's a good question in the chat that I think gets into the relationships and recruiting and football in general. RS asks, does the firing of Mike Yurcich change the dynamic in a negative way with Brad Mandler, the quarterback coach, for Ethan Grunkmeyer and for Drew Aller, or does PSU still hold a relationship with him? Dude pumps out QBs, looks like a decent 26 under his wings now. Brad has done some excellent things. We've had him here on the channel and interviewed him about his process. But Fitz, I want to ask you about this. From that perspective, does Penn State still have the ability to plumb that well the same way that they have been?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to depend on Drew. Of course, Ethan Grunkmeyer is a Mandler guy, so he's still coming in. That makes it's a pretty clear sign that things have not hit a speed bump or anything like that. But there's a good relationship there. It was very beneficial for both sides. Brad's not looking to come and coach, or I know people have asked about in the past about being an analyst or anything like that. But it helps him when his players do well. And, if you players are spread out across multiple schools, that's a good thing for him. That's a good thing for a lot of places. So I don't think that's an issue. I know that there's still a good relationship there with Franklin, a really good relationship with Danny O'Brien, and O'Brien has kept up with the quarterback recruiting. He's been on the road. Andy Koltanecki's in town and has been, in the building and things like that, but still keeping Danny O'Brien out on the road. He went and saw Beckham Kritza last week. That's really eased the transition. I can't, I feel like a broken record here. I actually feel like a PR agent for Danny O'Brien is that, people really like the direction that things are going with him as a quarterbacks guy. So
yeah,
they're going to keep that up as long as they can and figure all that stuff out. So that is where I would go with it. Of course, there's always going to be why would they do that sort of situation from the Mandler standpoint? But this guy has put several quarterbacks into the Penn State system, or he will at least after Grunkmeyer goes, and a bunch of his guys have camped here. He brings guys for visits. I mean, that thing is, it would be, I don't want to speak for Brad, but it would be foolish to sort of tarnish that relationship there.
Yeah. Paul asked this in the chat, and he says, do we have a chance with offensive tackle Chase Basantis? Fitz, I'm going to ask you this question. Just kidding. This is a great reason to go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and check out the Blue White Illustrated message board, premium content articles. Paul, this is a great question, getting to the heart of it. We get a lot of these questions, and here's the deal. If you want that information, $1 gets you 2 months. Use the code PSU1. That tells everybody that you're coming from the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, and that we love you here and we want you to have that information. But that is something where there's another level of things that we talk about here on the show that go on elsewhere. So, Paul, great Bisconti. I just noticed that. Chase Bisontis is the guy he's asking about. That has been something that you need to go PSU1, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and sign up for. I do want to ask you about the transfer portal, though, Fitz. Alan Herron, we talked about him on our breaking news video from Monday, which was just yesterday if you're watching this live. But I guess my question here is, if you want to give a quick recap of what you think of him, but getting a tackle in the portal, we mentioned, is rare. How do you gauge Penn State's portal health right now, given that everything is going on behind the scenes and that, we, the public, don't have access to all that information? So is this a positive sign for Penn State that they get a rare player? How do you view the team's progress in the portal, given there's some obvious needs that the team needs, and we haven't heard a whole lot about, some of those other positions?
You look at some of the positions that they're after. Take cornerback, for example. And Penn State, they may need a cornerback. They may not. I mean, it depends. But they have elected to sit back and sort of wait for guys to go in that they have expected to go in. Herron was a guy that was in the portal in mid-November, and all of a sudden just blew up at the end of November. Whether that's new tape or whatever, I don't know. But Clemson, Auburn, Penn State, a bunch of really big schools came through and offered him. Then Penn State proceeded to set up the visit. Like, this is showing you their cards without actually showing you their cards, and that this guy was a priority from the start. Now, that doesn't mean you don't recruit Chase Bisontis. That doesn't mean you're done with tackle. You would still like to find a guy that you could come in and plug opposite Drew Shelton and say, hey, you're going to start next year. Okay.
Right.
Whether that happens or not, I mean, that's just sort of portal recruiting right now. But this is an opportunity for him to bring in a guy that's, as we mentioned, sort of on that JUCO path, like 3 years left to play too. Can he play this year? Probably. Will he play this year? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to get into that Division I, Big Ten strength program and take to it right away and be ready to go by spring. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, because it's such a big jump from Division II in Georgia to the Big Ten. So, but it's a guy that has the opportunity, 6'5", 310. He's got the body to do so. You're going to see how strong he is. You're going to see how good his feet are compared to other Big Ten players. Compare him to Javen Williams. Compare him to some of those other guys. I don't think we mentioned JB Nelson yesterday. Like, JB Nelson can be in the mix for that tackle job as well, even though he's coming back as a starting guard, just because he's got experience and things like that. So it is a very good get for Penn State. People that I've talked to outside of Penn State are very high on him as well in terms of his physical potential. It's a lot of that right now. Like, you can't look at, and no disrespect to Herron or any of those guys making that leap, you can't look at Division II film and say, okay, this is absolutely going to translate. Like,
right.
Just because it's so hard. Like, you can't say that about junior college guys. You can't say that about MAC guys, lower Division I guys. So like, it's such a projection right now. But you do have time to make it work. You have 3 years to make two years work, and offensive tackle so tough to recruit, so tough to gauge, and so tough to project and develop. It's not a situation where you find, like we talked about, those defensive guys, their hit rate is pretty strong. It's not 100%. No position is, but it's an opportunity for them to get another big body in there that they think can hold up in the Big Ten. And we've seen November last year, November this year, those guys get dinged. It happens. And a lot of different guys have to play. So it's a good opportunity for Penn State to grab what is one of the best offensive tackles in the portal. And coming from that level, I don't know what the numbers are in terms of NIL, but coming from that level, he's probably going to demand a different amount of attention, a different amount of dollar numbers and things like that than a Chase Bisontis, which is
right.
That one's going to get expensive.
I just want to add a supporting comment on what you just said about the transition from Division II to Penn State. His teammate, starting center, number 58, I watched one game. I could find one game. The starting center was 5'11". You mentioned JUCO. It's kind of even a high school comparison there of you've got 5'11", 250-pound centers in high school. And just that one anecdote is kind of my point there. But just generally, like, there are things that don't compute from watching that film to what he'll be facing later.
I was thinking of this the other day. Like, a lot of times when you watch high school football, the best player in the field is the 5'9", 190-pound nose tackle, like, because he's so active and everything. Like, it was like that for my high school. That guy doesn't play Division I football, but he can play Division II football. He can play Division III football and be a productive guy. It's just a matter of these things get really big, really fast. It's a big game for big people. And I know people love the scrappy underdog and everything like that, but You're not putting him at offensive tackle and asking him to block JTT out there. So it's a situation where you found a guy that you think is big enough. You found a guy that you think can move well enough and mirror, and hopefully is strong enough to do so. I mean, some of those JUCO guys that they've brought in, have eventually done nice things, but it took some time to get their feet under them, and getting him in here for January is going to be a big deal, I think.
For sure. Nate, I want to ask you this question. Ben was having a conversation in the chat about the business of college football right now, and how the debate in the chat is it in flux? Is it broken? What are the rules? And Ben says there are no rules. Cash is clearly ruling everything in the game. So from kind of a front office perspective and a big picture perspective, how Fitz just said Chase Basantis or a tackle X in the transfer portal is going to cost a lot of money. How do you square all of this from what I was asking him earlier of portal health, and then from that perspective, Penn State health with NIL of their portal activity? So can you get any context clues about Penn State's NIL or anything from their portal activity? And what Ben is saying is cash seems to be king right now.
Yeah. Two things. One, people under 6 feet have feelings too, guys. So let's just start there.
Really not my problem.
We're humans. All
Nate,
right.
I was just going to blow right by it. Just like, let it go.
Treat us with respect.
I feel the same way.
You guys are jerks. No, where is Penn State's health NIL? Look, it's the same old, right? There has not been it's not like we're sitting here today and can say, oh, within the last month, there's been this major breakthrough, right? As though suddenly Penn State as a fan base or a donor class gets it. No, it's not. Is it better than it was 2 years ago? Absolutely. Right. They've worked hard at this. This has been something that they have invested quite a bit of time into, and energy and effort. And I think some small strides have been made, but also, there is a long way to go in terms of the culture of giving to the program from where some of Penn State's competitors are. It's just not the same. It's just not the same fan base. And again, this is kind of the caveat that gets lost in translation sometimes. But personally, I don't blame Penn State fans at some points for that, right? It's just such a it is a hard sell, I think, to say that the onus of responsibility for paying players falls to fans. I think that is a really, really hard sell. And Penn State fans are savvy enough, I would say, to realize that. That said, do you have options, right? Like, is there some money? Yes, there is. But I do think the one thing that stands out to me about where the program is right now is you can get a discount, right, on players that are already in your program. Bottom line, right?
So you're saying the value of retention is more so than the value of acquisition?
To me, yes. And I think that sentiment would be echoed inside the program as well, is that you have the devil you know versus the one that you don't. I think that there are players that Penn State has pursued, has had discussions with, right, et cetera, more intently from within than without at times, right? I'm not saying that they're not pursuing people in the portal. They obviously are, but there is a value that can be had for players that you already have that relationship with, that you want to maintain that relationship, that like you dig into the notion of, why did you choose Penn State in the first place? It wasn't for money. In 100%, right? 99% of these cases, it wasn't for money. That is not how Penn State has attracted its player pool. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there are needs to be filled. And I think the approach that James Franklin more or less announced, right, 3 years ago-ish, about being highly selective in the transfer portal, right? You want to fill your needs. You want to have pre-existing relationships with those players as best as you can. You want to know what the goods are, right? You want to know who these guys are before you bring them into your program, rather than just spending wildly to fix a hole, to fulfill a need.
Fitz,
I think all of those things are true.
I want to spin this to a larger picture then of, and this is not a Nebraska podcast, but Nebraska in the Big Ten. There's been a lot of smoke around that program recently, and a part of the conversation has been their ability to put together resources to, maybe not even go after guys in the portal, but potentially flip commits, kind of get back to Nebraska being a relevant part of the college football conversation. Is there a danger here, Fitz, of Penn State's plan of still recruiting high school football players, relationships, etc., falling behind with, other more well-established NIL pursuits as this thing matures? Or is this thing in such transition that we really can't project any of that?
I mean, I think there's a danger there. I don't think you can project it right now, just because you're looking in a couple of years and thinking that revenue sharing is going to eventually come. It's going to be a situation where it levels the playing field a bit, and then you're going to have an NIL on top of it. I mean, that's the part we forget, right? We talk about revenue sharing and these players getting some, but you can also use your name, image, and likeness in the way that it was meant to be used. So it's still going to be a factor. I don't know what it would be as much, because you're going from a baseline of I don't want to call it zero, but you're going from zero to whatever you can possibly make from these schools. But Nebraska, I mean, it's tough. I mean, they sell out every game to watch what they've watched over the last decade. That says something about the fan base that has, it's a dedicated fan base, and it's obviously out in the middle of not a pro sports haven in Nebraska. So there are advantages there, and they've always sort of been, able to throw their money at it. I know I don't want to say anything about the 70s and 80s, but that was a very healthy program in Lincoln, Nebraska. So here we are. So, it's a situation where I think that's one of those ones that I think is going to have a thriving NIL, have to have a thriving, business behind it to attract players, because of the things that are going against them. Not unlike Penn State, not unlike Central Pennsylvania. But it is a situation where they're also going to lean on their history, like Penn State. They're going to lean on a lot of things that, it's going to get a lot of players there. And I see a question in the chat about viewing their commitment as a 4-year or a 1-year. Still, most guys that come through the program expect to be here for 4 years. Still most guys that they sign. When you get really good, you think you should be compensated as such. And that's where it changes for a lot of these guys. You didn't expect player A to, all of a sudden burst onto the scene as a sophomore and be like, hey, I kind of like to be taken care of, because this guy over here, this school over here, maybe not this school, but this agent over here is telling me that if I do go to this school, they're going to take care of me as such. There's a lot of things that are going to bounce around your head in that situation. So we veered off here from Nebraska, Penn State, all that kind of stuff, but this is the sort of thing that's going on. I read a piece on The Athletic last week about the kid from Syracuse that went to Wisconsin, and the disconnect between the high school coaches that actually went on his visit, and then these agents that sort of popped up out of nowhere. Like that's the sort of thing that guys are wrestling with right now. And that's why it's so difficult. And that's why it's so really, from this standpoint, kind of funny how this stuff is all working out, because there's so many gaps and lapses in communication from school to player, from player to agent, from collective to agent to, there's just so many games of telephone going on that it's really fascinating to see this. And, I think there'll be stories that come out after this that sort of show kind of what a joke it is, like kind of how this all has come together without regulation, without the NCAA stepping in front of it. And now the NCAA is like, hey, what are we going to do? Here we are. So, Nate, anything to come back with that? You're on mute.
Yeah, no. The one thing that it stands out to me and I'm not sure it's fair. I'm not really in a position to speak on it eloquently, but I think that there is the mindset of, it's almost like the mob and protection, right? In terms of businesses downtown in State College, downtown or in the surrounding area, that don't exist without Penn State football, right? Like, bottom line is hotels aren't charging $500 a night for rooms, $1,000 a night for rooms if Penn State football doesn't exist. And so there is an expectation, an expectation from the program that some of that is going to get kicked back into supporting the program, because this is existential in a lot of ways for the program's success, right? Do you want that enthusiasm to remain? If you're a downtown business in State College, Pennsylvania, how much of your success is tied to the success of the football program, and what investment is demanded of you to keep that going, right? That is an area where I feel like, just speaking bluntly and reasonably, it has probably fallen short in a lot of ways. Penn State has, like, the football program has not gotten that type of investment to boost its NIL endeavors, and it's badly needed.
Like a certain expectation, I think, from that perspective of, and if I just want to hop in here with a couple of things to clean up here in the conversation. First off, there needs to be a statute of limitations on when we can give our hot takes about Nebraska from the 80s and 70s. Like, I feel like that was a safe one to fire off. But it's absolutely, to Fitz's point, you can't rest on your history. You have to be continually, and as James Franklin said, fighting every battle on every front, because if you don't, I think Nebraska is a fair cautionary tale of a program that thought they were one thing, and then when they didn't try to keep up with all of the things going on, they turned into the program we've seen in the last 10 years, however long they've been in the Big Ten. And that level of expectation of support from local businesses, I think, ties into that conversation, Nate, about you can't just expect to get stuff, because it requires something of you to maintain that level, I think was what James Franklin has said. Fitz, is that fair? You look like you had a thought about that.
I think so, but also I don't think the football program and the people doing the NIL here is a situation, like, I don't think this is a situation where they've done a tremendous job in the messaging either. Like, we talk about that 1 year program that Michigan ran last year. Nate, you were all over this from the start, and I don't think it's been, I don't want to call it unsuccessful, but Theo Johnson's not coming back. Like, there are guys that may come back still, but at the same time, like, you compare the way Michigan ran their 1 year and the way the Penn State's run their 1 year. I mean, Penn State's is almost non-existent.
Yep. No, and I think it's a very, very fair criticism of, look, this goes back to, right, kind of the original sin of how Penn State has handled its NIL situation in terms of broad-based support. It's like a morality tale of, we're going to do this the right way. Well, I am sorry to break this to Penn State fans, but the right way is the losing way. It is a losing mentality to say, like, this messaging of supporting 830 athletes. I am so sorry. I genuinely am. I wish, for everyone's sake, that everyone had a piece of the NIL pie, but the messaging itself is what loses the oomph that you need in this. Like, if you could just identify 5 players that you have a realistic shot of getting back, right? Caden Wallace would, to me, make a ton of sense to absolutely have a fundraiser for him, to say, hey, we desperately want you back. You are worth the $800,000 that we might be able to rate. Now, granted, that's an inflated number, but even if you can just show that dedication to getting a player like that back. Instead, the messaging is, hey, 1 more year campaign to try to get players back. Which players? Well, I don't know.
That is a perfect transition into this conversation about the players involved. So if we want to have a couple of specifics in this conversation, I just want to get from both of you, I don't want to lose this thread, but I do want to kind of fold in some names of interesting players that haven't made their intentions known. Who do you think is the most interesting of this group? Nate, you led with Caden Wallace. Is that the guy you would imagine is the most interesting of this group of guys who could leave, could come back? It's kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think he would be, in the sense that you look at other position groups and there are more natural successors, I guess is how I would put it, right? They're players kind of waiting in the wings. And I'm not going to say that Drew Shelton isn't, right? Or that Javen Williams isn't, right? There are options there at tackle, but it's just such a prime valued piece of real estate for a football program. Like I'm not going to call it desperation, but to have players there who you can rely on, you know, and in the context of what are Caden's options going to be post Penn State, I'm not saying that he doesn't have options. He's probably going to have great options. He will be an NFL guy,
draftable player. Yeah.
A draftable player, but is he going to be a day 1, day 2 guy? I think fairly probably not, right? That's probably not a realistic expectation for him. So if that's the case and you are able to make a competing offer to convince him to stick around, like I think that you have to do that. And I think that Penn State would like to do that, but I'm not sure that it's in a position where it's able to do that. And that's the interesting dynamic to me of, man, you know, is it a missed opportunity? Is it something that you can bridge that gap anyway, just by having a strong relationship? I don't know, but it's certainly a position that I think is of need for Penn State specifically. And a guy that if he were to return would be a massive win. Like, I don't think anybody would look at that as not being a massive win for Penn State.
Nate, are you saying, I'm doing it. Are you saying that Caden Wallace represents that hometown discount that you were talking about over Chase Biscotti, and that you don't need to go to the portal if you can just retain one of your football players?
I don't know if there's a discount there. That's the biggest issue, right? Is how many of these guys, like, I'm not sure, and maybe it's just me and my perception of it, but you are spending these couple of weeks interim recruiting your own players as much as you are recruiting outside players. That is the bottom line here is, and how all of these pieces fit together. Every single individual that you're talking to from your own team has things that they have to consider. Are you considering who is in front, right? What is the guy in front of you doing? Are they leaving? Are they staying? How hard are you working on that guy? And they're all talking to each other. Every player in the locker room is having a conversation with each other about numbers, about where they stand in the pecking. Like, it is.
Their parents are too. That's right.
And their parents are too. And it is very, very hard to sort through. I feel like for everyone, right? You can put yourself into the shoes of the players, their families, and Penn State coaches, of the feedback that they're giving me about what the offers are outside of Penn State. Are those real? Right? Are the numbers behind it real? Who knows? Like, it's all a lie. It's all just make believe. And so you just got to sort through what's real and what's not. And I think it's difficult for everyone involved.
Fitz, do you have another player that you would find interesting in this conversation to bring up, of guy who has maybe several options and we're waiting to hear from?
Yeah, I think Tyler Warren fits in here. Like, this is a guy that has been part of a 1-2 punch, and if he comes back, he can be the one punch. Like that is a situation. Now, granted, I think Penn State's got some really good tight ends that you could pair with him, but Theo's out the door. Theo's a guy that I feel like would be in that 3 to 5 range in there, depending on how he tests and things like that. Yeah. So there's legitimate pull from both sides, I think. Warren would probably be a little bit after him. But like that's a guy that I look at to say that if he comes back, it changes a lot of things. It changes, how you look at it. I mean, you were talking about a player that more about coming back versus what you don't know in the portal. And I think, we're a year removed from Parker Washington, taking off to be a sixth or 7th round pick. And I think that that's something that he always wanted to be 3 and out. And it's a situation where I don't know what the deal would have been money wise, but could you have enticed him to come back over Dante Cephas and Malik McClain? Like, that is a prime example right there of you knew what you were getting with Parker Washington. Yeah. Whereas you reach your hand into the grab bag and you pull out a receiver from the portal, it might work. He may have had wonderful stats at his prior school, but it also might not. So I think that is the situation that I would look to is, you know so much more. You have so much more information about your current players. You know their personality. You know how they're going to fit in that locker room because they have been in that locker room. And I think that's a very, a very interesting way to come back at it and see it. And I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting the next couple of weeks because we're going to look at guys that could play in the bowl, could not play in the bowl, could come back, could not come back. I mean, it's all very fascinating. As Nate said before, everybody's got a decision to make, even if you don't think they have a decision to make.
Ooh, there's a lot there. But it keeps us talking here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, gives us some things to chew on as we are in between press conferences, like I said. So press conference coming up, you hear more from James Franklin, Andy Koltelnicki, some of the other players and people over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel on Friday. But we've got plenty of conversation coming up over the next couple of days. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about Manny Diaz and his decision on the show tomorrow. Any final thoughts, guys? Nate, do you have any final thoughts on what we've been chewing on here at the end of the show?
Yeah, the last thing that is funny or amusing to me is the guys that are goats, right? That get scorned or
Good
what
goats or
have
bad
you.
goats?
What's that?
Good goats or bad goats?
Yeah,
Bad goats,
right?
Bad
Okay.
goats. But no, just
Scapegoats.
like
Scapegoats.
look, Caden Wallace has been a scapegoat at times in his Penn State career. Bottom line is that is how he has been perceived. But also, if he leaves, the fan sentiment is going to be, oh no, right? Like it's
Yeah. Well, so that's a great point, and that was something that I was thinking about. A part of this conversation is, I think there is a certain part of your brain that thinks about the transfer portal like either free agency or another layer of recruiting, where suddenly, hey, we can upgrade. Not just we need to replace, but we can upgrade with a guy at a certain position, not taking into account all of the things that go into the transition to a new school and why they leave the portal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like there is the fantasy football option or the team building option of, hey, the portal's great, instead of saying, hey, as you pointed out, Caden Wallace was pretty good by the end of his football career, and a veteran offensive lineman that's 25 is way better than a dude who's 19, even if he's more talented.
And you have to consider what, like the piece of the equation that never enters the conversation is, what are your resources to spend on these upgrades, right? The players that you don't know, but you are considering upgrades. Bottom line, it's not good enough.
We're getting into a baseball analogy here, Nate, and that's very dangerous because, don't be the Pirates.
And that's why Penn State reverts to guys that they know. Like, you look at the portal and the guys that, every name that goes into the portal seems to be better than the receiver room. Like, that's not the case. But you look at the guys that they have had prior relationships with, and that's sort of where they filter down to. I mean, you look at Andre Green was on campus this weekend. That's a guy that Penn State recruited and feels like they know pretty well. I think they were top 5 or 6 or something like that in the recruitment, not seriously in it before he went to North Carolina, but that's a guy that you had an opportunity to get to know at some point. I mean, Chop Robinson, Johnny Dixon, guys that you were in on at some point, but maybe just didn't finish the job when they were high school recruits. I mean, that is why they would like to sort of lean to those players, lean to the guys that they have an idea of that personality, how they fit, because when your personality fits in, it makes it easier to fit in on the field.
Yeah, and you're not spending money on a guy in the portal if you are paying for it and then causing problems of somebody who comes in and whoops, he's not good and he's being paid more than guys that are on your team. Whew. Fitz, any final thoughts here? I gave Nate some final thoughts, and we went another 5 minutes on his final thoughts.
No, I think I'm good. I think I was shooting for like a 35-minute show today, and I see we're coming up on an hour. But we appreciate everybody joining us in there. I'm still going to continue to cover the portal, the 2024 recruiting wrapping up. A bunch of commits were on campus this weekend. In addition to Andre Green and Alan Herron, Jalen Lucas from Indiana was on campus this weekend from the transfer portal. So there's a lot going on. Of course, the defensive coordinator search, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We're going to talk a little bit more about that before the press conference this week.
All right, check all that out. We will be back tomorrow with more BWI Live. Talk to you then.